Two foreign domestic workers arrested for allegedly abusing two babies under their care. The coroner's court ruled the 39 people killed in the Lama ferry collision were unlawfully killed. And Vice Premier He Lifeng said at the World Economic Forum, China's development presents an opportunity, not a threat. Hello and welcome to TVB News. I'm Melissa Hekalea. Police have arrested two foreign domestic helpers on suspicion of child abuse after injuries were found on two babies. The two infants are 4 months old and 16 months old, respectively. Both of them are receiving treatment at the hospital. The younger infant is in critical condition. Mimo Singhai reports.
This suspected child abuse case was reported on Sunday by the Prince of Wales Hospital. The hospital said that blood was spotted in the brain and the fundus of the eye of a 4-month-old male baby. Medics thought the injuries were suspicious and could be a symptom of shaken baby syndrome. Authorities launched an investigation and discovered that the baby had a 16-month-old brother. Bruises were found on both of them. The 4-month-old infant has undergone a brain surgery and is in critical condition, whereas the brother's situation is stable. The brothers live with their parents and two foreign domestic helpers at Jiuqing Shenshui. On Tuesday, the force arrested the family's 28-year-old Filipino and 45-year-old Indonesian domestic helper on suspicion of child abuse or negligence. Investigation on the Indonesian helper is ongoing for alleged harm to baby. Home CCTV footage suggests that the Filipino helper had hurt the 4-month-old infant in the early hours of Sunday. Sources say the parents have previously spotted bruises on the infants, but they did not connect it to child abuse because the marks soon disappeared. Speaking to the media on Wednesday, the police said CCTV was only installed in the living room and that officers had not been able to identify serious child abuse behavior from those videos. While the bruises on the babies are new, the force said doctors still had to determine when those injuries were inflicted. The 28-year-old helper will appear at Fan Magistrates Court on Thursday. Moment 9, TVB News.
The coroner's court ruled that the 39 people who died in the 2012 Lama ferry collision were unlawfully killed. Celine Chan has more.
The death inquest into the disaster began last May. Lots of bereaved families arrived at the West Kowloon Magistrates Court on Wednesday morning. Assistant Director of Marine Chan Si-yin was also present. On October 1st in 2012, Hong Kong Electric arranged for its employees and their relatives to watch the National Day fireworks over the Victoria Harbour, with some of them boarding the Lemma 4 vessel. It was hit by the Hong Kong and Kowloon ferry operator vessel Seasmooth. Without the presence of a watertight door, the Lemma 4 began to tilt and sank shortly, resulting in 39 deaths. Coroner Monica Chow read out all the 39 victims' names in court and said 36 of them lost their lives due to drowning, while the remaining 3 died of multiple injuries. The skipper of Seasmooth and Lemma 4 were convicted of manslaughter and endangering others' safety at sea respectively. The coroner said the inquest applied the principle of the balance of probabilities and relevant evidence met the standards for both civil and criminal trials, ruling that the 39 victims were unlawfully killed. 6 key issues were being looked into during the inquest, including the Lemma 4's lack of a watertight door. The coroner said some comments coming from the experts were based on the assumption that removing the watertight door was wrong. Regulations at the time did not request vessels navigating in designated waters like the Lemma 4 to be equipped with a watertight door. As such, the vessel's design was in compliance with the regulatory requirements at the time, and it should not be considered a faulty design simply because a large-scale accident occurred later. The coroner has pointed out it has been confirmed by the designer of the Lemma 4 that the omission of the watertight door was a design decision made by the team collectively. Based on the principle that even one of the compartments was flooded, the vessel would still maintain buoyancy. The court also finds the testimony of Choi Lee Shipyard's director Ken Lo credible that the shipyard consciously made the decision not to install a watertight door. The court has reserved 2 days for the announcement of the verdict, and the coroner would continue addressing the remaining 5 issues on Thursday, including the suspicion that the crew was suspected to have worked overtime. Celine Chan, TVB News.
Aggressive Construction Company Limited, which has been involved in multiple fatal accidents in recent years, including the collapse of a crane at a residential project on Anderson Road in 2022 that led to 3 deaths, has won its appeal against the government's decision to deregister the company. High Court Judge Yvonne Cheng agreed with the constructor's argument that the Buildings Department failed to provide written reasons as to why it refused to renew its license, which is required by the Buildings Ordinance. However, Cheng emphasized that the court was not to decide whether the company was fit for license renewal, and it should be determined by the Buildings Department. The Buildings Department said it will study the judgment in detail with the Department of Justice and actively consider an appeal. The banking industry will implement guidelines to strengthen support for the elderly and customers with impairment in using relevant services. The guideline on elderly-friendly banking services aims to establish standards in support of the government's efforts to promote the silver economy. The other purpose is to enhance elderly customers' financial literacy and digital adoption through increased financial education. Vice Premier He Lifeng delivered a special address at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, pointing out China's development presents an opportunity, not a threat to the world's economy. He also met with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on the sidelines of the event for discussions on economic and trade issues involving the two countries. Bessent said China remains committed to an agreement to purchase U.S. soybeans. Danny Zhou has the story.
China's Vice Premier and top trade negotiator He Lifeng said tariff wars pose serious risks to global economic growth. Speaking at the Davos Congress Hall, he said the world must not return to the law of jungle where the strong prey on the weak. He defended China's capability to cope with various economic challenges and transformation. The Vice Premier said China has been working to foster common prosperity with trading partners through its own development and has never deliberately pursued a trade surplus. He said on top of being the world's factory, China hopes to be the world's market and opening wider to global products and services. On China-US trade relations, the Vice Premier highlighted the significance of dialogue, noting the two sides both benefit from cooperation and lose from confrontations. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who held talks with He the day earlier, announced China has met the milestone of U.S. soybean purchases this week and is on track for another 25 million tons next year.
Suggested maybe he would want to buy a little more, because President Trump always brings that up with Party Chair Xi when they speak, and they've done everything that they said they're going to do.
Bessent also said China's supply of rare earth magnet flows meets expectations with a fulfillment rate of approximately 90%. Meanwhile, the U.S. trade representative hinted a new round of China-U.S. trade negotiations ahead of a potential meeting between the two heads of states this April. Jameson's Greer said the talks could move past highly sensitive areas such as technological competition and rare earths and focus on basic goods and services. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
U.S. President Donald Trump's plane, Air Force One, returned to Joint Base Andrews Wednesday after departing for Switzerland for the World Economic Forum on Tuesday evening. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said the decision to return was made after takeoff, when the crew aboard Air Force One identified a minor electrical issue. She said out of an abundance of caution, the plane turned around. A reporter on board said the lights in the press cabin of the aircraft went out briefly after takeoff, but no explanation was immediately offered. About half an hour into the flight, reporters were told the plane would be turning around. Trump later boarded another aircraft and continued on with his trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos. U.S. President Donald Trump made a rare, nearly 2-hour appearance at a White House press briefing Tuesday, coming on the first anniversary of his inauguration. Trump doubled down on what he sees as a need for the U.S. to control Greenland. This as he's scheduled to make a keynote address at the World Economic Forum in Davos this week. Tracy Furness has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump departed Washington en route to the World Economic Forum in the Swiss Alps Wednesday.
So I'm going to Davos. I believe it'll be very successful, the trip.
Just hours before, Trump was taking questions at the White House, where he struck a slightly milder tone on Greenland, a day after he threatened to hit 8 European countries with new tariffs and threatened the NATO alliance over his attempts to assert American control over the island.
I think that we will work something out where NATO is going to be very happy and where we're going to be very happy. But we need it for security purposes. We need it for national security and even world security. It's very important.
You said you're confident something's going to get worked out in Greenland, but Greenlanders have made it clear they don't want to be part of the U.S.
Well,
what gives the U.S. the right to take away that self-determination?
When I speak to them, I'm sure they'll be thrilled.
This as world leaders are responding to Trump over Greenland and the subsequent threat of tariffs on European countries. French President Emmanuel Macron said in a text, which Trump made public, "I do not understand what you are doing in Greenland." Macron defended the text, telling reporters at the World Economic Forum that we must defend our principles, we must defend our interests without being aggressive. European Union Foreign Affairs Chief Kaja Kallas threw the EU's support behind Greenland on Tuesday, telling the European Parliament that the Arctic island belongs to its people.
But let me be clear. Greenland belongs to its people. No threat or tariffs will change that. Sovereignty is not for trade. The European Union stands without doubt with Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark in defense of their territorial integrity and sovereignty. Saturday's remarks by President Trump create a situation we haven't experienced before. Our response must be to remain calm, hold our ground, and act in unity.
Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Greenland has become a center of global attention as U.S. President Donald Trump continues to provoke a sweeping tariff fight with Europe to get his way in taking control of the island. This as many longtime allies of the U.S. remain resolute that Greenland is not for sale. Greenlanders have started a daily protest in front of the U.S. consulate against Trump's policy towards their country. Tracy Furness has more.
The northern lights illuminating the sky above Greenland's capital, Nuuk, Tuesday. The lights usually seen in the darkest months from October to March and only on cloudless nights. The sky this night may be cloudless, but clouds are definitely gathering on the ground as Greenland faces threats from the United States, which wants to control the Danish territory. But for these Greenlanders, they are taking matters into their own hands. Every morning before the sun rises, they stand in protest outside the U.S. consulate in Nuuk. This 70-year-old Greenlander protests while holding up 3 flags.
Every day here in this week, Sunday included, I'll walk together with the 3 flags of our Commonwealth, the Faroe Islands and Greenland and Denmark. We are equal and we want to remain like that, and we stand behind that, and we stand together with those who stand behind us, like the European Union and the NATO, every free country in the world.
This is Greenland's foreign minister arrived in Nuuk Tuesday after holding highly anticipated White House talks with US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, along with Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen.
I'm feeling very good. Now I'm home in my country with people that I love, country that I love. So I'm happy, even though that I know that we have a lot of work ahead.
Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Still ahead, the number of immigrants moving to Canada from the mainland and Hong Kong has declined. The man who assassinated former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is sentenced to life imprisonment. And Donald Trump recapped his first year back as U.S. president as protesters voiced their opposition in Washington. Welcome back. The number of immigrants moving to Canada from mainland China and Hong Kong has declined following the Canadian government's policy to reduce quotas for immigration and student visas in 2024. Statistics released by Canada show that before the quota reduction in 2023, nearly 32,000 of the country's immigrants came from mainland China. The number dropped to nearly 30,000 in 2024 and further reduced to just over 18,300 for the first 10 months of last year. The decline in immigrants from Hong Kong was even more significant. There were approximately 7,500 in 2023, dropping to 3,510 in 2024, and only 270 in the first 10 months of last year. Following its reduction in such visa quotas, sources say local universities could face insufficient enrollment from international students, which could affect their revenue. A Japanese court sentenced a man who admitted assassinating former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to life imprisonment on Wednesday. The case revealed decades of close ties between Japan's governing party and a controversial South Korean church. Tetsuya Yamagami, 45, had earlier pleaded guilty to killing Abe in July 2022 during his election campaign speech in the western city of Nara. Abe was one of Japan's most influential politicians, serving as a regular lawmaker after leaving the prime minister's job when he was killed. Tetsuya Yamagami, 45, pleaded guilty to murder in the trial that started in October. He said he initially planned to kill the leader of the Unification Church, but switched targets to Abe because of the difficulty of getting close to the leader. U.S. President Donald Trump recapped his first year back in office with a lengthy presentation at the White House. Meanwhile, protests against his administration erupted once again in Washington, D.C. and other areas. Daniel Rao tells us more.
For more than 100 minutes, U.S. President Donald Trump took the press on a winding journey through his first year back in the White House. Trump went into detail on things his administration has done, starting with a stretch of show and tell in which he held up photographs of people he said immigration officers had arrested in Minnesota. Not long after, he hoisted into the air a thick stack of paper with the word accomplishments written in bold letters on top, a list he said would take him more than a week to read.
Here's the book on accomplishments. And this is something, ooh, I'm glad my finger wasn't in that sucker. That could have done some damage, but you know what? I wouldn't have shown the pain. But here is here's the book. These are all things we have. I'm going to read a few of the samples, but look at this. These are all, each line is something that we did. Nobody did that before. And it's big stuff, too. Look, we have the hottest country in the world. So, I will read you a few.
In talking about immigration enforcement actions, Trump claimed the immigrants his administration has removed from the U.S. make the Hells Angels look like the sweetest people on earth, only to then pause and compliment the infamous motorcycle gang claiming they voted for him. On his signing of an executive order to bring back mental institutions and insane asylums, Trump told a story of walking to Little League Baseball with his mother, who told him a nearby psychiatric facility was home to very sick people. A U.S. president also had a moment of reflection on the divine. Trump has suggested in the past intervention from above brought him back into office and saved him from an assassination attempt. A reporter asked if he believed God was proud of him. Trump said he believes God is very proud of the job he's done, and that includes for religion. Meanwhile, protesters in Washington, D.C. took to the streets to speak out against Trump's administration.
It is our responsibility to make sure these oppressive institutions and the people ruling it do not rest. If we can't have no peace, they can't have no peace.
Last year, the Trump administration deployed U.S. National Guard troops in a federal takeover of local law enforcement. Since then, protests across the District of Columbia have sprung up often. Darrell, TVB News.
A Barcelona commuter train crashed Tuesday after a retaining wall fell onto the tracks. Spanish regional authorities said at least one person was killed and 37 others injured. The crash in Catalonia in northeastern Spain came just 2 days after a separate deadly train collision killed at least 42 people in the country's south. Emergency services in Catalonia said of the 37 people affected by Tuesday's crash, 5 were seriously injured. 6 others were in less serious condition. Emergency services said 20 ambulances had been sent to the site of the crash and that the injured were taken to hospitals in the area. Regional firefighters said most of the injured had ridden in the first train car. Back locally, the Leisure and Cultural Services Department's new anti-touting measures take effect today. Starting today, citizens booking indoor basketball and volleyball courts must provide the details of 2 other users. They must also be accompanied by at least one of the 2 named users when they check in. The use of computer programs and bots is also explicitly prohibited for venue booking. Any attempt to bypass or disrupt the system is considered a violation. Violators' accounts will be suspended for 360 days without further notice. That is the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.